All right. So good morning, everybody. Happy Friday again. Welcome and thanks everyone for joining for another community sync for PWA Studio. We have pretty good turnout today, and I'm guessing it's because of the content we're covering, which is a pretty hot topic. So first, let me start by saying, typically during these meetings, what we do is we tend to kind of skew towards demoing the recent work that the team has completed during our previous, I would say, sprint, but we don't do sprints, so Kanban iteration, I guess. And we demo that work. We take questions from the community. And over the last a few months, we've been thinking about how do we make sure that the community is more engaged in what we're doing, has better feedback channels with the team to either ask questions, point out specific opportunities or gaps that they see with PWA Studio. And this was a conversation that I've actually recently had with Jordan Eisenberger, who, as we all know, is the community maintainer for PWA Studio. So as a part of that conversation, we had talked about, hey, maybe as a part of these recurring meetings going forward, we should set aside some time to essentially do a community corner where Jordan, as a community maintainer, has an opportunity to present a topic, present maybe a solution, present some work that the community is doing to the larger audience. And it gives the community an opportunity through Jordan to kind of to own a piece of this agenda. So today we are going to have the first iteration of this community corner. In the future, we'll look at putting in a graphic in the video community corner.
Make sure just to use C's. Don't get cute.
Yeah, you can't do that. It's like reading Rainbow. Community corner.
Ooh.
But we'll kick off that kind of topic. We'll actually have that be the primary topic for today, given the nature of I think this conversation. And so for the first time, we'll introduce Jordan on the call to kind of lead us through this topic of server-side rendering and how it relates with PWA Studio. We have Shane on the line to join. We have Mr. Zetlin here. And so I'll turn it over and you guys can get us started there.
Yes. All right. Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, so basically, can you guys hear me or?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
Oh, I said hello as a group thing, not, yeah. Practice, actually. We prepared ahead of time.
Definitely. Yeah, so basically, SSR has been like a hot topic, which has been coming on and off every like few weeks, I think. And this Monday, I guess, Shane had a little like rant in a positive way about SSR and wanting to contribute, but SSR like still being a bit of a, he called it an elephant in the room. So we thought it would be a really good idea to spark a conversation about SSR. So if you want to express your concerns or solutions about what we should do with the whole SSR problem, this is the time to speak out. And I guess I just want to hand it over to James, and maybe you can talk a bit about what we are, where we're standing right now with SSR in Studio, and where we're planning on going.
Well, I first of all have been less than involved in the conversation that's gone on so far in the PWA community chat. And that's partly because I'm working on cool stuff you guys will see, and partly because sometimes I'd rather listen than talk, believe it or not. And just to speak to I think the overall point that you guys have made, and I know it's not just Shane, but Shane has put it really concisely and succinctly, is full SSR seems good. It's already a known approach. It has advantages, which you can enumerate. Are we going to do it or not? Right? You can go in a little bit of detail. I'm going to dive down that because I don't know how much we agree as a team or as an organization, not just on what we're going to do, but also on what the industry is doing. So basically, you've said that Facebook and the Angular team and et cetera seem to be pivoting towards server-side render, which I know is true. Though I don't think, like Shane, like you've said, that that's an indication of the movement of the industry as a whole. I think that that is both kind of it's part of the capability of a place like Facebook or of apps that are written in Angular generally to kind of pick and choose their own IT stack. And also, most of the things that are designed for that are not subject to the same pressures as e-commerce, where you have that first page bounce rate that you have to force down because you're in competition with other sites basically based on experience alone. And so it's not just to like throw one tech giant at another to say Google is moving away from SSR for their search results and ranking. And those parts of the kind of wider social graph that are still using SSR are still important, but they're not doing search ranking with it. They're just kind of gathering what metadata is necessary to like put together a media object like Facebook, whatever. So getting into a little detail, we believe that server-side render is not going to be worth the money it takes to implement and support in a very short time. But we are realistic people. We know also that e-commerce has its own pressures, and the partners as well as the merchants have kind of a fiscal responsibility to not take too many crazy risks. So we know that just saying we believe SSR is not going to be worth the money is not enough for anyone to make the decision. I know that even great allies that we have like Jordan, although one day I think you're going to do a heel turn, Jordan. I can't wait for you to betray me.
Highly doubt it.
That you also express some doubt. You don't just believe us because we say so. So I want to ask one favor of the folks on this call and the folks in this room, which is if you believe that I could be right, which I have been in the past, I would like to come up with a way that we can gather the data that proves it, which is what I know that you guys really need, in a way that does not terribly negatively impact customers or take too many risks. And one thing that I think has really helped me think of ways to do that is the debut of Jordan's store Eleganza, which leverages RenderBot for server-side rendering. What I like about that is that it gets to what the merchant needs, which is a really pixel-perfect, high-fidelity server-side render of the pages themselves, and it doesn't intrude too much on the actual development of the app. I prefer it to React server-side render for that reason, and I know that React SSR is doable and capable and pretty fast, but I think, in my experience certainly, when you're working in an agency model, when you are working on comps and trying to get them visually right, and you're trying to get performance metrics in terms of first contentful and meaningful paint right, sometimes you end up colliding with the needs of the server-side render to load the application all the way. Like, it's not just writing isomorphic components that don't use the window, object, etc. It's also that your app, if it progressively loads, it can be hard to know how to server-side render it. And I know that it's doable, but not everyone is JH. So I prefer the idea of a Rendertron approach because, real quick, my proposal would be that if in the future SSR is a needless expense, the way that we'll prove it is by showing that a merchant with similar size and capability can achieve the same rankings with a site that doesn't have that full-time SSR and that high HTML SSR that only renders very minimal web page metadata and then also just enough page structure perhaps to indicate what the schema of the entity is. If we can show that they get the same rankings with that, which costs way less money and is a way simpler deployment, then we can start bringing people aboard. And what I think we could do is create a site that could do that, but then put Rendertron on it as part of the initial deployment. Maybe this isn't for a merchant's full experience, their home site where all of their ranking stuff goes and all the reputation score goes. Maybe you could be a microsite or entry into another market or region. But my idea would be that you use Rendertron or pre-render and get the site to where you want it to be, and then turn it off, see what happens. because the act of turning it off is very, very low impact structurally and IT-wise. You just turn it off and you let the server-side minimal SSR that you've implemented work, and you see if the rankings persist. In my view, they may even rise. So that's the vision I have of starting to prove this in a way that doesn't sacrifice too much client risk. That's basically the thesis that I come to here with. And then if you want to talk about the particulars of why I think this and what we would do in Studio to support this methodology, I'm all ears. But that's my whole thing.
All right. So basically you're saying like we should do something similar to Rendertron and then test with a live web shop and turning it off, like just completely turning off Rendertron? Is that what you're like?
I would say keep Rendertron on and wait until the search rankings and stuff sort of stabilize after what the crazy stuff that always happens after a new site deploy or a new redesign. Let the rankings reach what they seem to be stable with Rendertron operating, and then plan to turn Rendertron off for a period of time and watch what happens to the rankings. That's what I would say I'm suggesting.
All right. I don't think I can convince my customer to do that though. Like he's like, yeah, Jordan, I'm not your guinea pig. So
Right,
if
of course
you
not.
want to try that, we should. Huh?
Of course not. Most customers aren't guinea pigs.
All right,
Some
so,
are.
but we can test it, right? We can we can test this like if we just create like this fake website and then just let it run through Rendertron and then just test if the site gets ranked or decreased ranking value. So that's something we can test fairly easy, I guess. Or
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I think we can test this only by gathering enough data that we start to convince people. It's like it's a hill to climb. And that's why I'm saying I wouldn't take a client who is maybe debuting their entire site as a redesign, their whole online presence, because that's a lot of risk to take. If they take 6 months and achieve good rankings and ratings, they won't want to risk turning off Rendertron and losing their rankings and ratings in their only revenue stream. So that's why I'm thinking the profile of the client we might want to do this with is somebody who is creating a microsite or somebody who is entering a new region, so that they can take the risk with a smaller part of their business.
yeah, gotcha. All right, so one solution would be Rendertron, but I also know that Shane is a bit of an advocate for full SSR, and I know he has a lot of experience with that. So maybe you can talk a bit about what your experience is with writing full SSR components and isomorphic components.
Sure. So I'm probably less bothered about the, let's say, the 5-year plan, because as a working developer for clients right now, I need to have answers that can get sites live. And we've just launched another one recently. It's very, very large, B2B.
Right.
And for that particular client, and I know this is all kind of anecdotes, but if they had an external huge SEO company come in, they needed to be able to crawl the site. There's no two ways about it. We also helped another big site launch. We didn't do the front end, but we recommended Rendertron to them because they came back to us and said, we've done a React application and all the people that are trying to get this into production are telling us we can't do it until we can crawl the site. So regardless of like what the beautiful future is with Google and being able to crawl these sites without any SSR, that's not, for me, that's not a relevant conversation right now, and I don't think it is for a couple of years. I think it's definitely valid. So that kind of brings me on to the next bit, which sounds like a lot of people assume, rightly or wrongly, and I don't know everyone's experience, so don't take this, I'm sort of guessing here. But to me, it sounds like if you can spin up a Rendertron proxy and have everything going through that to serve to bots, you can add the 2 or 3 lines to a component to make it work and render as a string in React. So I think what I'm getting at here is the 2 scenarios are you need HTML. And if we're saying that's the case because we need to get sites into production, then we've got two other approaches. So we have to have HTML. One way of getting HTML is to run Rendertron, and one is to render React components. And I think what it sounds like is that there's an assumption, I think, in the community that running your own infrastructure to run something like Rendertron is actually simpler, or it's less work and less maintenance than just using the components you've already written. So I'm only here really to be that annoying sort of buzzy bee in the corner to say, we've got a lot of experience now doing this, and the making your components able to be rendered on the server is we found not a huge tax at all. Now, and the benefits obviously. And by the way, Jordan, you said I'm an advocate for SSR. I'm actually not an advocate for SSR, and I was just talking to Alex Russell recently about this. I'm just an advocate for as fast as possible websites, I guess. And we launched that one. We launched one, the first one that was you guys have spoken about a lot, which we really appreciated. But that was our first time, and we definitely fell down the rabbit hole, which Alex Russell often talks about when you see him tweeting, which is SSR can actually have a negative impact on performance, right? So
I thought I was
just
want to say that during this conversation. Sorry, I interrupted.
But then the one we've just launched, for example, this week, we've traced it, we've analyzed it, we've even got Mr. PWA himself, Alex, to trace it and compare it to sites that are not server-side rendered, and the analysis is it's still doable without an impact, basically, a perf impact. So that's just really all I wanted to say is that I think sites and clients are going to want HTML delivered in payloads for the foreseeable future, whether it's 1, 2, or 5 years. And all I wanted to say in that chat the other day is that we want to be more involved with Magento and Magento's PWA Studio project. We really want to do that, but we've seen it from sort of first-hand experience that it's not that much work to just make this React app render as a string, and we'd rather do that than go to the expense, have to go and learn how to run Rendertron in production, how to deal with caching and caching validation in Rendertron, and all these things. It's like, if you're going to run Rendertron, if I was to show you my node server that's running SSR, it's one handler in Express, and we have all the other requests going handled by the load balancer before they hit there. So I just kind of wanted to put this idea out there that, is it really complex to do server-side rendering in React? Do you have to render the entire page? The answer to both of those is no. You can selectively render, etc., etc. So I've been a bit rambly here. I'm happy to answer questions, but yeah, we've just put another really, really big site into production this week, and we used that approach, and we've had developers at Google trace it on like they do on their Moto 4G, whatever old Android phones on web page test, and the analysis is you can do it.
Okay.
So that's all I wanted to come and say, really, because I think a lot of when I talk and I hear like working developers in the community, when I say working, I mean like for clients, they're all going to want this. Trust me. Like they need HTML, whether it's for 1, 2, or 5 years, I don't know, but they need it.
All right. I do have lots of questions. Somebody else has one? Jordan, please feel free to MC. I'm just going to be a person
I think Niklas had a question, or if I
No,
may
I
hand real quick.
I just wanted to express my feelings on this. I think like Shane said, every agency who's picking up PWA Studio would want full SSR rendering, I think, because that's what the clients ask for, and that's, I think, for you guys, it's also a big marketing thing, I think, because if you start a project new, then you have the question if you can do SSR or not, and if you have the choices, PWA Studio or something like Next for example, you actually, I think I would pick a next application and pull my components from PWA Studio in this application so that I can have full server-side rendering. And I think that's what the majority of clients or customers will do in the future. I think maybe that's just an assumption, but you guys are a bit limited because you have to support upward PHP. Maybe that's also a point which doesn't allow you to do to do full SSR. Maybe that's a point to discuss.
Yeah, that we have an actual limitation right now in our infrastructure, but I think we were lucky that it made us think down this road. But that's not at this point the reason that I have the opinion I have, because that's not always going to be the case. Otherwise, I agree with everything you're saying.
What Dara doesn't understand is currently Google pushes us to have PWA applications, and they try to solve the crawling issue for, I think, almost a year or 2 years for JavaScript applications. And currently ranking getting better every month if you have a full JavaScript application. And currently I'm not pretty sure if a server rendering we are required to have it, or it's maybe a requirement from our customer, because most or it's getting more and more applications without server rendering, and they rank well. If you think about Gatsby or some different applications, they don't use server-side rendering, and they ranking, or they have some rankings. Google pushes us to PWA, and currently I don't understand what are the benefit to have a server-side rendering.
Sure. Can I just come in there for a second? Is that all right?
Sure. Yes, of course.
Yeah. I think there's a big difference, and we've seen this over the last year, between just using the term ranking as though, like Google can build up a ranking of your product over time versus the crawlability of your site. So it's why I almost wanted to frame the conversation to be, you have to first decide, do you need to be able to deliver HTML? Forget server-side rendering and Rendertron. To get a site into production, do you need to be able to serve HTML? Examples are things like, if you're in AdWords and you've had an advert banned by Google or something, they may need to scan your site again within 30 seconds. And if you go and watch the talks from the Google engineers who work on search, that headless crawl isn't every day. It gets queued up. And I'm sure over time it'll be less and less queued. But the idea that you can change a site, something on your site, and it be reflected in 30 minutes is non-existent if you're completely headless. If you don't have any content there, you've got to wait until Google has looked at your site and said, oh, this is really JavaScript powered, so I'm going to queue you up to be rendered on the next time Headless Chrome's free, we're going to send it through, okay? So all the sites I've worked on, we need almost immediate feedback. And that's why I say, don't say SSR versus Rendertron. Say, right now to get into production, do you need to be able to deliver HTML or not? And then, because then the answer becomes, then the question becomes, well, are you going to go to Rendertron or are you going to go to Thingy, to server-side rendering with React?
Can I ask you something, Shane?
Absolutely.
You said something that I really wanted more detail on. Maybe we can do it later, but you mentioned that when you are doing SSR for your app, you don't have to render the whole thing. And that was one of my main concerns. That was one of my main concerns with doing, at least using React HTML out of the box, which is a synchronous method, on on the type of application that a PWA is, because as people have observed, like when writing tests, you need to figure out like business cases for when the page is done loading. You can't just like wait for a particular event. So can you go into like some detail about how you organize your application so that for each given type of page or entity, you know how much to load it to get to crawlability and then you stop?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know how long this meeting is, but I'm free to go into some amount of technical detail if it won't bore people. Do you want me to give you like a 5-minute technical? Like, you have to give me a limit because I'll keep going.
My 5-minute technical talks are invariably 15 minutes, so we can take it offline or you can talk about it in Slack. But
we have about 18 minutes left on the call, so just as a total time check.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying, like, if this sounds and looks really good, then that pushes me in your direction. Because the main thing I should say, and Lars, I want to clarify this with you, is that I still believe that SSR is necessary. The question is what kind. And Jordan, you were asking me what's the low and high SSR. So we definitely need to deliver HTML. That's the language of the web. How much? When I say I don't know if SSR with the full application is worth the money in the future, I mean like every pixel or every DOM element. Wherein it used to be true that you want to give both bots and humans the same thing, or you'll get dinged for user agent sniffing. But now the idea is it's the same content, just presented in a different structure. So for us, our idea is in an increasingly pluggable way, just with Upward, you can render a minimal page with content, maybe H1 tags, etc. But the nice thing about that is it's cross-platform. The not nice thing about that is that even if it's a small amount, it's a different render pipeline. It's through this template thing instead of React. What you're saying is you could do at least a partial render with React alone, right? Yeah. And that would be nice because that's less code. So I would be interested in that. Yeah.
Yes.
Because it accomplishes the same thing that we say we want to do.
Yeah, and I'll only take a minute just to give a very high level then. So that was really the thing, because when I spoke to Alex about this yesterday, and he did some traces, and we were really happy. And the trick is, well, he distilled it down to something that was really, really smart. And he just simply said to me, it doesn't matter if it's server-side rendered or not. It's how much JavaScript you're doing overall. And so with server-side rendering, there's a risk that you send more JavaScript. And what we proved in ours was that we were both able to give HTML and reduce JavaScript. So it means you have to be a bit smarter about certain things. But in React, it really can be as simple as, if anything is behind it can be a Boolean, for example, in a component that says, were you rendering on the server or not, and then just return null. And that will stop that piece from being server-side rendering, right? Server-side rendered, sorry. So, again, I don't want to take up any more of the call, but I'm happy to demo the site we just launched, which is a great example of this, where it's extremely lazily hydrated. And that means that we just deliver the HTML needed for the search engines and for all the SEO agencies that we worked with. And then we very much are conservative about how much we hydrate on the client. And we've got the flame charts to prove it and blah, blah, blah. So it kind of feels like the best of both worlds at the moment. And it's not, again, when you say it sounds more work, but is it as much work as having to run Rendertron in production, which I don't know. Jordan can fill us in on that because I've not done it before. But that's where we're aiming, that's where we're coming from. And then when I brought up Angular and React, the reason I brought that up is not because they're pushing you to render the entire web application with every DOM node every single time. The whole point is that they're working on systems that allow you to partially hydrate it so that you don't take that hit with the JavaScript, but the HTML is already there. React,
awesome.
React in particular is going to be able to do that with concurrent mode. So, so granted. Oh, sorry, yeah. And one last thing, when Google is saying to people like us building applications, just don't bother with server-side rendering, I can almost guarantee it's because 99% of them take that performance hit. So what they're not saying don't server-side render. They're saying every time we see people do it, the performance gets worse.
Yeah, that's the main reason, yeah.
I think that's the main reason. So I hope I've been clear on the call and sort of put across my opinion, I guess.
Oh, no, very much so. I appreciate it. The more I understand about the partial hydration process, the better. My concern is always just, can it be maintainable? So I want to give Jordan some time to talk about making the Rendertron thing easier, but I also want to ask you about the possibility of making this stepped approach easier. Is this something that you feel like you could abstract into libraries or tooling so that you don't have to be, I think the word you used was smart, in order to do it, because that's what matters to me.
Honestly, the only bit is it just affects slightly how the router works on the client. If you can just get that bit right, the rest of your application doesn't hardly change at all. And that's really why we've gone with it again on this next client, and why we're going to probably do it again on the next one as well, because getting the routing bit right is hard, granted. It's not extra code, but you just have to think about things a bit differently.
Okay.
Once that bit was solved, we're like, oh, well, just something hidden behind a lazy loaded, like React.suspense, that's enough to stop it server-side rendering. So, for example, a related products block on the product page, we don't server-side render that, because that's additional content that the user can get in later.
Gotcha. So essentially any dynamic rendering at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the way you change the router is that you make the router render synchronously by at least predetermining what the page type is, conducting the initial GraphQL call for results before you begin the React render. Is that the difference?
Yeah, well, only for the URL resolver. Yeah. So the component the component that you guys use, the same query that you guys use, we just do that before we even try and render anything, which I think you may also do.
We used to.
But so we always do that so that we know which page we're rendering, and then we just and we go from there, really. Crucially though, we do it with Apollo client, that query, instead of just a regular fetch. And the reason we do that is so that when the client tries to hydrate it, it knows it's seen that route and it can just carry on. And that's kind of how the whole thing works.
Yeah, that sounds awesome, and I do want to hear more. And I'm curious to probe into how reusable you can make this stuff. It would be a favor, though. Rising tide lifts all boats.
I think it can be added to PWA Studio just as another alternative. It doesn't have to be that PWA Studio turns into SSR land. It just has to be like, my employer, we want to be part of your project. And
exactly.
So I'm trying to sort of bridge the gap a little bit and say, look, this is possible because we've shown it to work in production. So can we make that an alternative? So that would be interesting to look at after this call, I guess.
That sounds great. I really want that. I'm just trying not to sound thirsty or entitled to you guys' work.
Not at all.
Okay. And anyway, speaking of, you were asking about Rendertron and how hard that is to go do. I know there's somebody on the line who might have an opinion on that.
Yeah, so you're totally right. Doing Rendertron is not easy, especially if you're doing it the first time. We've invested a lot of hours, and today my colleague Derek gave me a Slack, and he's like, yo, we're going to open source our Rendertron solution. He called it SEO Snap, which is probably a name that could still change, but I think it's a good one for now. So I just want to share my screen real quick. Let me check. Are you guys able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I am not the technical guy behind this whole story, but these are some images he slacked to me. So just to give you guys a little heads up of what's coming next week. This is obviously a fairly simplified graph of how it's working. He told me that if developers see this, they know it's a really easy setup. So everything is, I think, in one Docker container, and just gives you, it spins up some servers and stuff. And then because Eleganza told me, like, I need a dashboard where I can see all the index URLs and stuff like that. You also get that in our package. So this is something that's still in, I guess, alpha or maybe even beta, that we are going to ship next week, and we hope you guys, it's going to be useful for you guys. So right now I don't think it's easy to get a PWA Studio shop running with SSR, and this should like make it possible to do within an hour. So that's something I'm really
May-
excited about, and hopefully you guys um, can play around with this next week somewhere.
Maybe I can add something to this too. We also use a pre-render solution. It's called Pre-Render.io, and it's a software as a service solution, so you don't have to host it yourself. I think Rendertron is also available as a software as a service, but I'm not sure about that. But as I said, we use this solution, and we're fairly happy with it because it's really easy to set up. You just have to route the bots from directly from Nginx, for example, to the service, and you get a warmed cache and dashboard and something like I see on the screen right now. You get that there too for free, and not for free. Sorry about that, but it sounds really similar to that. So maybe someone can. And we use it in productions, and it's fairly stable. Yes.
Yeah, we know the concept is about the same, but as you probably know from Dutch guys, they're really greedy. So we're like, yeah, we're not paying for this. We'll just make it ourselves, and
Yeah,
this
of
also
course.
gives us a lot of control over the code, because we are planning on like introducing SMS for when you have a lot of 500 codes and stuff like that. So this doing it ourselves and having full control over all the caches and stuff like that just enables us to integrate more and more features into this, and
Yeah,
yeah,
sure.
that's basically. But pre-render.io it's basically the same, but we're Dutch, we're greedy. So that's what I have for you guys right now.
So I think maybe we'll save this we should save these last few minutes for questions. I would say really quickly as well, like we've had Mr. Cockman over here diligently taking notes. We'll make sure as a follow-up this call. Obviously, there's a number of solutions out here. We want to make sure that if you're a developer out there considering a PWA Studio project and you have a requirement for SSR or serving HTML, right, that we point you to resources, whether it's SEO Snap, through Rendertron, Pre-Render.io, Shane's smart solution, right? Like we make sure that these are documented and there's a ready access to this kind of information and knowledge, right? So let's maybe save this time for questions. I think we have a question first up from Christopher that he put in the chat of how hard is converting PWA Studio to Next.js? Anybody working on this already?
My main concern with anything like that is how much static pre-rendering needs to be done. I mean, we would absolutely have made PWA Studio a flavor of Gatsby if we knew that we were only dealing with like 4-digit numbers of catalog products, but we are dealing with 6- and 7-digit numbers of catalog products, and we don't feel like we want to build that many HTML files. So that's the issue. I know that Next.js does a lot of server-side render, but it's designed basically for websites that either do simple CRUD, like a Rails site, or that are kind of brochureware. There are great advanced versions of Next sites that are totally better than that, but our experience was it didn't really fit the e-commerce use case, and I don't think it does still. I mean, disagree with me. I hope I've demonstrated that I'm looking forward to that, honestly.
Hey, thanks. I got your point. I'm just curious about that, Justin. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, understandably.
All right, do we have any other questions on the line? Anybody in the chat?
Okay.
I love a good awkward silence.
Everyone's questions answered forever. That's what it sounds like to me. Yeah.
Hold on. Lars has a question about who can clean up the backlog. Lars, is a great question. Obviously, it's not related to this SSR topic, but there has been some kind of internal movement that we've had over on our side with our internal ticketing systems. We've been trying to work through the details on our side to make sure that obviously what we're doing from an internal system in Jira And what we were previously doing in GitHub projects is completely connected. I would say that high level, we are still very much committed to being open and transparent with our backlog. We've just trying to figure out this like internal tooling system and automation or manual process. So that's been a relatively new thing that's happened. We haven't obviously talked about it on this call, but we are working on that in the next few weeks of making sure that we're cleaning up the backlog. We're making all of our work visible. Obviously, we demo everything during these calls. We're very transparent with what we're working on next during these calls. So we'll get that cleaned up. If you have any questions about what's coming up next, what we're working on, we're always happy to answer those. So feel free to ping us in Slack, and we'll give you the kind of in-depth, detailed run through.
Yeah, I would say two things on top of that. So we're growing up really as a proper product within Magento 2. This is how Magento 2 core operates, right? And so I think we're looking at ways that we can still be as transparent as we have been relative to that. And I think the other part too, as part of our 2020 priorities, we want to look at partner-led contribution. We see that there's a lot of value in things like SEO Snap and some of the things that Shane was talking about just in this call alone, much less other key aspects and functionality like localization and others that we've talked to other partners that have been interested in really helping us accelerate this as a viable option for the many. So be looking at that as a kind of an opportunity as most of this is published and revised in the next couple weeks. But if you have any questions, we're all ears. Let us know.
And of course, if you have great ideas on how we can improve our communication, our feedback loop with the community, we're always open for those as well. Again, we're absolutely committed to the community being a core part of everything that we're doing with PWA Studio.
Yep.
What they said. Sure.
Yeah, my main point there is currently it's very hard to start with contribution in the project. I picked last week an outdated ticket and sent a pull request there, invest 3 or 4 hours for making this pull request, and then I get an answer on my pull request. Yeah, sorry, this ticket is already outdated. We refactored it completely, and sorry for that. But we try to have a different favorite of this kind of component, and so we completely refactored. And for me, I try to start with contribution there because I really like the project and I really like React and try to do things there, but it's not so easy to start for me there. And I had already the opportunity to work with James in a workshop.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Like that's a real concern. We have actually even recently been talking with Jordan as a community maintainer about how do we better curate a list of items for the community that to work on. So again, we'll have more information coming out about that in the next couple of weeks. I'd say next few weeks as we work through this process. If you have questions, you're looking at the backlog right now, and you're asking yourself, can I start working on this? Always feel free to reach out to myself, to James, to Jimmy, any of the team here, and we can actually point you in the right direction on where we would like contribution. We do have some things to clean up in the backlog, and we'll get there. Yep. So we are at time, and I want to be respectful of everybody else's time. So I'd say thank you, everybody, for joining today. I think it was a really great conversation. We have some action items to follow up on, some conversations to follow up on. And again, we look forward to the future community syncs where we will actively include this this type of community corner topic during the call. So thanks, everyone. Smash like and subscribe. Honk if you like it. Recording has ended.
Yeah.
And that's how we always end the call. There you go.
Okay.
Have a great week.
Hump if you like it.
Yeah.
We don't ask questions
weird.
about these sign-offs. We just do them.
Honk if you load incrementally. Have a good one.
Thanks, everybody.
See you later, guys.
Thanks, really. Bye.